Hey, Rental Roundtable listeners, for episode number 60, we had on Eddie Wilson. He's the general manager at City Rentals in Ontario, California. He's been there about 13 years, started cleaning the bathrooms, toilets, worked his way up. He's done every job in the company. Great conversation around culture and how they start off every interview with talking about work ethic and how if you come to City Rentals, you're going to have a great work ethic. Part of that is they've had people there for 20, 30 years because of how strong their culture is. We talked about the importance of the counter staff and different questions that they ask to make sure it's a mutual vetting. You're building trust with the customer to make sure you're recommending the right piece of equipment. And as part of that, you're making sure they're the right fit for you and potentially not a criminal with all the theft happening in the industry. So we talked about some of the red flags and how they overcome a lot of the theft that's happening in the industry. Lastly, we talked about where the market's going, right? It's been a slower year for a lot of rental companies. So we briefly touched on that at the end. So love talking to Eddie. He's got a lot of energy, a lot of competitiveness, a strong will to win. And you can kind of see that in the company he's leading at City Rentals. So awesome episode. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, folks, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 60. We have on Eddie Wilson. He's the general manager at City Rentals in Ontario, California. Eddie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on.
Yeah, Eddie, first question. I can't believe you shaved this morning. It's
Yeah.
amazing your beard has grown that fast.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Tim Allen, the Santa Claus, man. I shave, and then within a few hours, here it is.
I don't know. I think you're giving Elliot Vigil a run for his money. I think you may have him beat.
I won't say that, man. That's a recognizable beard. So I
He's
would
been
never
on.
step on his toes. So
All right. Well, we'll let our audience decide. He's been on the podcast. So if you want to watch his episode, watch Eddie's episode, you guys can I'll let you make the call. I won't weigh in, but it's an impressive beard. Well, Eddie, thanks for coming on. You're the general manager at City Rentals. I believe you've been there about 13 years or so. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, this year's 13.
I was looking on your website. Started renting tool equipment since 1968, and if I'm good at math, here 57 years
Yep,
in business,
that's
about east of
correct.
LA. I guess there's not really a west of LA. You'd be in the ocean, but equipment rentals, party rentals, propane sales, and all started with sort of reading the website, but all started with the four T's, right? Tractors, tiller, trenchers, and trailers, and kind of expanded since then. So, awesome business. You're obviously involved with the CRA. We'll talk about here in a bit, but before we get into all that, I'd love to hear your story, really, how you got into rental, at least 13 years ago, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back even a little farther. I started at a corporate store back in '07, '06. I want to say '06, '07. And I was just one of those young yard guys right out of high school getting introduced to the rental industry. Had a buddy's dad who was a GM at one of these corporate stores. And, out of high school, I was just kind of looking for a job, and I got introduced to the rental industry, on a corporate level. I was a yard guy there. Worked there a little over a year and a half, and kind of moved on. I was the young guy trying to pursue college sports, that kind of thing. And so I left the rental industry, went to school back east for a little while. When I came back, I was kind of bouncing around jobs, and I reconnected with an old friend that worked with me previously at that rental center. And he happened to have a position here at City Rentals. And so I just said, hey, I'm looking for kind of a stepping stone job, looking for anything. And I started back here in the rental industry in 2012, cleaning bathrooms, mopping, sweeping, yard position, and fast forward, here I am. So, I got introduced early at the rental industry. I understood it. I enjoyed it. I didn't know if that was going to be my fit career wise, but getting reintroduced later when, you have a different head on your shoulders, it was very lucrative, and I really enjoy what I do. I mean, the rental industry is a lot of fun. Every day is different.
That's right. Every day is different.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say it gets in your blood and you sort of are here, and you choose to be here. But I totally resonate with in high school, you had, I had different jobs, whatever, cutting grass. I was a caddy, did things like that. And,
Mhm.
you kind of like these jobs, all whatever. Then you go to college, you come back, you're like, yeah, maybe this job's actually pretty interesting. Like I think your perspective changes. Sounds like you were in rental, took a break, see what was out there. You came back, you go, actually, no, that rental thing was actually pretty interesting because you know, a rental may be a lot of things. One of the things it's not is boring, right? You're
Right.
fighting fires. If you have ADD like I do, it's a good place to be. You're not sitting around a desk all day. You're kind of moving around and doing different things.
Yeah, that's
When
it's funny. We get the young guys in, and we try to train them that. We try to tell them like, hey, the rental industry, you're what we call a hat turner. You answer the phone, you're at the counter right now. Now you're a driver. Now you're a mechanic. You know what I mean? We wear many hats around here. And I try to explain to them, we may have that set schedule. That phone rings one time. It's over. Here we go. We got to be pliable.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next thing. Let's make it happen.
A lot of swivel chairing is what we would call it. You're sort
Oh,
of
there
like
you go.
over here, and then you come back over here. I guess if you keep turning your hat enough times, if you turn it always backwards, maybe that's the unemployed hat. We don't have that.
Yeah, you walk in with a hat like that, you may
a little
not be getting
too
the interview.
little too casual.
Yeah.
It's interesting you worked at a corporate store. Was that a regional player or a national player? And I'm really
Yeah.
curious why you decided to move more towards the independent side. Was that a conscious choice? And how does that
Um,
compare to the corporate store you're working at?
I'll tell you, when I was originally with the corporate store, it was a national store. They're nationwide. I'm not afraid to say it. It was United. I started at United Rentals, and nothing against them. It was, I was just a young guy. I was a young kid
Yeah.
in the rental industry, and the career wasn't on my mindset. It was, football, sports, and college, and that kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
but then coming to the mom and pop side, right away, just being at that lower level position, the environment, the culture here, I mean, I was first introduced to, guys that have been here for 30 years, and
Mm,
coming into a small business like this, I mean, I don't like, even at United at the corporate store, there wasn't even, I don't know if there was anybody there that was 30 years. You know what I mean? But coming
mm,
into this type of environment and meeting guys at all these different levels within the company, and you had retention beyond 20 to 30 years at all these different levels. It wasn't
mm,
just an ownership or a management level where you saw that type of retention. So right away I was drawn to the culture. I knew that, like, this is where I want to be. This is the family oriented, because don't get me wrong, they were accommodating, at that level. It's just coming to a family owned business that's, so well established. You see that culture difference, and it was so attractive to me, and I blended in well with it. So it's, I feel like it's helped me, and I'm complimenting that type of culture. So for sure, on that level. And then on the other side of it, at the corporate level, I only worked in one position. Here I've worked a lot of them. But I'll tell you, just alone, the customer service and the attention to detail and the care of making sure that you're getting the piece of equipment you need, getting your job done. It's not just about the rental. There's a saying that I hear a lot of companies use, and and I wouldn't say it's exclusive to one company. I'd say it's exclusive to mom and pops, is that, we don't rent equipment, we rent solutions. And I've heard that, amongst several companies, but I really feel that at like a independent level in the rental world, that, I mean, that's a really true statement. The conversations I have with guys here isn't just a transactional type thing. We're opening up, we're talking about our lives, within that brief segment that they're at the counter. So I'm really drawn to the independent side, and I think that there's a lot of power in independent rental.
for sure. Well, I'm drawn to that too. That's what I spend all day thinking about. And I love that saying, we don't rent equipment, we rent solutions. I think every independent listening to this should take that to heart. If they, and likely they already do.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, like, from a culture perspective, you mentioned that some of the people at City Rentals, not just a few, but maybe a lot of people have been there 20, 30 years, which is generally unheard of. I'm in the millennial generation and we stick around for about 2 months to get a new job, right? 2 years,
Yeah,
right? No, seriously, right?
I
Like if
am there
you're
with you.
somewhere for 5 years, you're like, wow, that guy has really stuck it out for 5 years. 20 years, 30 years, you have to have something special. And that really starts at the top. It starts with leadership and culture. How have you guys built that at City Rentals? Because that's not necessarily a normal thing.
No, no, and I would be remiss by not giving credit, where credit's due. The original two brothers that owned it, Dale and Richard Briggs, they did a phenomenal job building that at an early stage. And then the next, generation coming in with Jeff Roberts, he did awesome to build onto that, to
Hmm.
reinforce those. So really it wasn't just a light switch type deal. It takes time. It does take time, and a lot of that is buy-in too from your people. You have to complement the culture that you're trying to present. You have to have that backup. And Dale and Richard did a phenomenal job kind of laying that foundation at the beginning stages, when City Rentals started. And of course, as you know, being in the millennial generation as myself, we've seen that shift in workplace environments. The
Mhm.
work our work environment here at City Rentals is definitely not the same that it was in the 70s and the 80s. A huge difference. But that's that thing of being pliable by growing. Because if we would have stuck with that same mentality from the 70s and the 80s, we'd have zero retention. Because times have changed. We know times have changed. The employment conversation, I'm sure you comes up several times, and it's a continued conversation and a continued effort from employers to find those right people, you know. But again, that's all blending together. It's that culture. You're coming up, and times are changing, so you have to tweak it. You have to be okay with change, with kind of getting into the unknown of that. Especially when you have the per se older dogs. That's that saying, older dogs don't learn new tricks. That's tough to do. Even in my 30s, it's tough to do. I've been doing something for so long, and I believe in it, and I have had success in it. So of course you don't want to change it. But here we've really embraced that. A lot of things, even when it came to changes in carb, and environmental changes. You can either be the wall and say no, we're sticking to our guns, or you can embrace it and say, how can we either monetize it or move forward with it? There's different ways to look at it. And I think looking at your culture, that's exactly that. Monetize your culture. Monetizing your culture is employees wanting to come to work, making the effort, putting in the hard work, putting the blue collar in blue collar. You know what I mean? And that's part of the culture. That's how you have to look at it. Culture is just as much as monetizing, environmental regulations or something like that. That's how you have to look at your culture.
Yeah. And on the change part, I think reality is change is generally uncomfortable for people. I think by nature it is. However, it's so important to embrace change. I think if you look at going to 2030, 2035, I think it's going to go change at a slower pace or faster pace. Well, undoubtedly it will be a faster pace, right? And I think one of the things I learned when I worked at Uber, where they were constantly trying to disrupt themselves because they felt like if we were prone to disruption, it was only a matter of time until someone else did it to us, and we'd rather disrupt ourselves. So they were constantly iterating and learning, how do we make ourselves better? How do we try to do things differently? And I thought that was such an interesting perspective. Like, not to rest on your laurels, but constantly every 6 months, every year, look at how we're operating. How do we disrupt ourselves? How do we build a new version of ourselves? And that constant, and that's hard. That's hard to every day because like you do get comfortable and things do work. I want to ask more about the culture because I do think that comes up with a lot of the top groups we talk to, and there's a lot of people listening here who are starting a rental business. They're 2, 3, 4, 5 years in, or a lot of people also buy rental businesses and now they're the owner, the general manager, and they're like, "What do we do day one?" How would you describe your culture in 2025 at City Rentals? You mentioned it's changed over the years. And what advice would you give a general manager who is thinking about building out a great culture at the business that they're running?
That's a little tricky, but there's a lot. That's a loaded question. So I'd say right away, don't be afraid to buy into your people. Don't be afraid to get to know them. Go out there. That's the thing here is one of the biggest things that when we get young people in, we tell them, if there's one thing that you're going to leave with from City Rentals is it's going to be a work ethic. We're going to teach you hard work, right?
Mm,
And so there's this balance. There's this balance of like, and if you look at the 2025 culture of today, there's this push of like, your job doesn't run your life. You've got your life and your job. You have these balances, right? And so I would say as a GM, don't be afraid to get involved in that balance game with your employees. Talk to them about their
mm,
life, get to know them. And I used to work in jobs where it was a leave it at the door policy. They didn't care whatever happened outside, in the world, they leave it at the door. I would say don't be afraid to kind of get to know them, get to know what they're dealing with every day, right? It's that human element. But at the same time, to really get that buy-in is there's the balance. You have the business side of it and the personal side. So what we try to do is get them to buy into us, so as I'm buying into you as a GM, know that for this to work, you have to buy into City Rentals, right? They're part of the picture. The big thing that we try to teach on the culture side is none of us, including myself, are indisposable, right? Like the business is going to
mm,
work. If I leave today, City Rentals, the gates are going
mm.
to open, people are going to come in, they're going to rent, right? So we're not indispensable, but at the same time, we play a vital role in the big picture of how City Rentals operates.
That's great. I think you mentioned a few things there. One, work ethic you're instilling. Two, balance. And then three, redundancy, which is important. And, key man risk is what people would like, you got one guy who knows how to run the whole computer system or the whole back office, and they're the only one who does. And if they get hit by a bus, you're totally screwed, right? Like,
Right.
so you have to have redundancy. Have you on the work ethic side, when you're telling folks, hey, look, you're going to come with the city rentals. We're gonna teach you a lot of things, but one thing I'll promise you is you're gonna get a work ethic. We're gonna teach you how to work hard. How does that resonate with candidates? I imagine that actually may be a forcing function where the people who maybe don't want to do that may self-select out, and actually, in a way, you're actually you're recruiting the best people who naturally want to work hard. Has that sort of been like a forcing function on the recruiting side when you
Yeah.
mention that up front?
Hmm. It is. And, because that's one thing we talk about is, on the work ethic side, I mean, ideally, honestly, it's hard to teach that. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Teach that attitude. That's not something that's like, hey, come on in. I'm going to teach you how to have a great attitude. You know what I mean? That's not really that's a hard marker to train, but I can train you on how to service a scissor lift. I can train you on how to load equipment. I can train you behind the wheel. But what I can't train is attitude and work ethic
mm.
initially. And again, this is a slippery slope talking about, young people coming in out of the education system and what we're focusing on, that not to get into, wrongs or rights of either or. But that does young people, they hear that and they're kind of like, oh man, that's that fast food conversation. Okay, I could go work fast food, $20 an hour, easy, no problem. But yeah, I mean, there's really no path after that unless there's a few areas you can move into, but really that's it. That's all you're doing. When you get introduced to something like this, you're learning an industry, you're learning. I mean, there's so many avenues that you can take from just working in the yard, from what you're going to learn here on the technical side when it comes to communication, equipment, servicing equipment, that kind of thing. But that kind of puts it into perspective of, oh man, what am I getting into here? Or somebody that likes a challenge, I want those guys. I want those people that are going to come in and say, yeah, let's do it. When I say, hey, no matter what, just so you know, it gets to 105, 110, you're going to be hooking up a trailer in the sun. You're going to be loading chairs. You're going to be doing this. And it's all stuff. And then, like, one of the key phrases we use is, I'm never going to ask you to do something that I have never done or am not willing to do. So we kind of lay that down there is that, look, if I ask you to pick up a mop, because I picked up a mop before, or if you weren't here to pick up a mop, I would be picking up the mop.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that idea and it's that buy-in that, even at a higher level, we're not afraid to get dirty. We'll be out there. I'll load a trailer with you. I'll be stacking tables and chairs, and that's that work ethic side. But at the same time, it comes with enthusiasm and energy. So it doesn't seem like it's like, oh man, we worked hard today. It's like, dude, man, we got it today. But again, for the younger generation, that's not a common thing. That's not a common motivation. It's rare to see.
Yeah. Well, I think, you didn't say the phrase, but servant leadership, you leading by serving others
Yeah.
and getting out. My dad was in the military and he always tried to instill that now. So that's a lot of how the military operates is through servant leadership and you getting in there with the troops. And I think your team probably resonates also like, if you say, hey, I don't want to clean the toilets, you're like, look, and like they probably know your story. You started cleaning the toilets, right? You have done every job that you would ask people to do. And I think that means a lot. And I love that. I think it's important for the audience to hear is like you're very upfront. Here are the expectations. You're going to work hard, and you're going to leave here at some point with a strong work ethic. And I think that conversation up front is so important because you're setting the expectations. And there's a lot of employers who will say whatever they need to say to get someone in. Oh yeah, we're going to promote you fast, and it's a great place to
Mhm.
work, and it's easy. And like you guys don't operate that. It's a longer view, right? And I think that's part of why you have people who've been here 20, 30 years. I do want final question on the culture side. I mean, I could tell you have a lot of energy for this and a lot of excitement about what you're building at City Rentals. Where does that come from? What gives you that pride and excitement and hunger to like get up every day and just get after it? I'm curious.
Um, you know, I um I would say a lot of it involved in athletics,
Mm,
being young in athletics and having that driving force. I did have the support system at home of, well, it is support, but at the same time, there's some mandatory guidelines there, but part of it was athletics, in order for me to be successful in the competitive environment that I was in on all these different levels of athletics that I took part in. It was the 4 a.m., 5 a.m. workouts in the morning before anybody else was up. It was the 9 o'clock workouts at night. It was the extra time and the effort put in, and then I think it's also that reward, right? Like, what is my like, what do I look at as a reward, right? It's not always money. It could, and it's not always personal time. It's that, what is my monetary gain that I look at this? Is it time? Is it the value of success, that idea that, I'm doing something bigger? So I think a lot of that is you got to find that too within yourself. So it's not just about the dollar for me. There's other elements that I look at that's a driving force. And again, I want to be successful. I want City Rentals to be successful, and I want everyone here to be successful. So a lot of it was from the athletic world coming in and always being competitive. It's, everything was a competition. And here it's that's what it is. It's City Rentals. That's the team, right? And we're all
Mhm.
part of it. And I think it's just growing up in that environment for so long. It was just that's just what I know of success, is that's how we do it. And when we did it right, we were successful. So then you just
Mhm.
duplicate what was successful, right? And then you slowly tweak it. So again, don't get me wrong, like coming in here as a motivating sports guy, not everybody's on board, because everyone's kind of like, I'm sure some people when I walk by, they're like, really, Eddie? You're going to keep doing, I've heard it enough
Yeah.
today, but and so, one shoe doesn't fit all, but at the same time, it's effective. I've been doing it for decades and it works, and that's what people want to be around. People want to be excited to be around each other. They want, the high fives, the, hey, how you doing? That makes a big difference. Walking through the yard, boom, high five them. Hey, how you doing today? Good to see you. Every morning, hey, how you doing? Boom, how's it going? Boom, how was your night? Boom, great to see you today. You know what I mean? The acknowledgement, the happiness to see you. Hey, man, I'm great you're here today. I'm so happy you're here today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your effort today. At the end of the day, great job, guys. Good effort. You know what I mean? A lot of that goes a long way.
It goes a long way. The positive energy, I mean, just that's so huge. And I love that you said the athletic part, because I listened to a podcast last week with Graham Weaver. He's an investor. So they bought hundreds of companies, and he's hired and fired probably hundreds of CEOs and management teams. And they asked him what makes a great leader, great CEO in their businesses. He said two things. Number two, like 1B would be grit. You're going to get knocked down, but you're going to get back up. And you do that enough times, you know that no matter what happens, you're going to get back up, and you get this confidence about you, this grit, right? That's 1B. The most important thing he said was a white hot desire to win. You're extremely competitive. You're going to knock down doors. You want to win. You want your team to win. And I think when you got that attitude, it's not about yourself. It's not like you're a golfer maybe, and you're going to try to win a championship for yourself, but like you're a hockey team or a basketball team, and you're like, how do we win together?
Mhm.
That characteristic as a leadership team, like he found that was the most important thing in the most successful CEOs and leaders they had. So you're telling me you grew up in athletics and you got that competition drive and that energy. I resonate with that too, and I think that's so important. And it's funny that you're saying that, because I just listened to that last week. Uh,
Yeah, we
so
do see that. You see that, like, when it comes to the hard work, the grit, exactly what you
yeah,
said, that desire to win. We do see, when entry level positions such as the hardworking positions, people in the athletic world tend to do better. They're used to that. They're used to that. And it was funny because one thing that I talk about with the guys here, I always mention, I'm like, what's funny is when I was in athletics, the only time you were really talked to when I was a young kid with the, kind of the old school mindset when I was young in sports was, we only talked to you if you did something wrong, and that was the idea is that, if you showed up and you worked hard and you won, it was just like, you were just part of the winning team. It wasn't anything individual. It was this team thing, right? And so now coming in, and again, it's changed. That was kind of when I was young in the '90s, like the hardcore. We'd talk about the '70s, '80s dads. And that was always a conversation with our dads. It was always like nothing was said unless it was wrong. If I don't talk to you,
right.
keep doing it, kid, you're going right. But now it's you. Like people need that. And
Yeah.
and again, that's not wrong. It's not that's not the wrong idea. It's a way to support us beyond the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 10 or whatever your hours are. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And again, that comes into the culture side of it, So,
Part of building trust, and like a lot of the studies have said, and this isn't like coddling people, but like generally you need 5 positive interactions for 1 negative for them to really trust you. Like if you just come in, it's 1 to 1, you're off. If it's 2 to 1,
yep.
if it's the opposite and you're only saying negative things, like you have lost trust, right? You got to encourage the positive things. So when you do come in with a redirect or a critique, you've already built up that trust, right? And a
Yep.
lot of studies that have shown that. Um, I do want to talk about counter operations. You've had a lot of jobs in the rental industry. I think every job at your store at this point. I don't know if there's a job you haven't had, but one of the most important ones is the point of contact with the customer. A lot of times that starts at the counter. Tell me about what's important about that, because if you work at a grocery store, right, they're checking out their milk and their bread. There's not, I mean, you're not making recommendations on what recipe to give them, right? You're just sort of silently checking them out. They have a lot of self checkout kiosks, right, at the grocery store. You don't see that at rental because they're uh, it's a conversation, right? That make 10 or 15 minutes as you make recommendations. What's important for rental companies to know about the counter side of things, right? Because that is a lot of the art of what makes rental companies special and different.
Mhm. Right. I think right away, when you're looking at it from a managerial position, it's your people, right? Right away, it's who are you giving the power to control the assets of your business? I mean, that's really what it is the person answering the phone, writing the contracts, dispatching, they're controlling the assets of your business. So right away, you have to look at who you're bringing in, who's answering the phones, who's writing the contracts, who's communicating with the customer, right? And so I think right away you got to look at your the dynamic people that you have available to you. And that's why it's also important to promote from within, on a cultural level, because then you're training these people on how you want them to be interacting with customers. It starts in the yard, with what our yard guys do, how they communicate, sending equipment out, checking equipment in, loading and unloading. If you look at just what they're doing alone by them bringing that to the counter, it fully reinforces what we try to do. So, but at the counter, I mean, you've got an individual that's picking up the phone, and right away there in sales, they'll tell you within the first 10 seconds. And I'm sure that stat's incorrect, but within that time frame, within the first few seconds of interaction, you kind of have the feeling already. You kind of
Mm.
know where this interaction is going to go. So right away, your point of contact has to be top notch, right? So, enthusiastic. I'm happy you're calling, that. And it's important for the customers to know this isn't just a transactional relationship. Like I have a job here. My job is to make sure that you are getting the right piece of equipment to get your job done in a way that's going to make you say, I can trust them, they're reliable, and the way they interact is with integrity, right? And so a lot of that starts with me just asking you basic questions. It's that pre-qualification. So as you come in, I'm qualifying you in different elements, right? My first thing I'm doing is I'm qualifying you as a customer. I'm saying for example, Kyle, is Kyle a customer of City Rentals, right? And how do I do that? I ask for the required documents for it to work, right? For this transaction to take place. So I'm qualifying you as a customer right away. Is it an individual rental account? Are you a future account customer, reoccurring, that kind of thing? Then I'm asking you the job side of it, right? So now I'm finding out what piece of equipment do you need. Now, again, if you're the pro contractor, right, I'm not going to tell you what you need. I'm not going to say now, but if it's something, I'm not afraid to say, hey, Kyle, like that's really not meant for that. Typically, this is what customers would use. So I'm helping guide that conversation. And just that element alone of asking the right qualifying questions does one of two things, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to show you on one end of it that, hey, like this company cares. They're going to make sure I'm getting my job done. This isn't just, oh yeah, you want a jackhammer? Okay, see you later. Well, let's talk. What kind of jackhammer do you need? Are you breaking up concrete? Is it asphalt? Is there rebar? How thick is it? Do you have electrical outlets? How much cord are you going to need? Do you need a compressor? Right? So there's all these questions that you can ask. I mean, and if you think about any piece of equipment that you're renting, there's a ton of a ton of questions that go along with that. Tillers, trenchers, anything from small scissor lifts. Are you on asphalt? Are you on concrete? Is it level ground? Right? So you have all these qualifying questions. So one, I'm qualifying the customer, I'm qualifying the job, and making sure that on a customer service side, you're getting what you need and that it's getting the job done, right? We're not in this revolving door of you just coming in and taking something and trying to figure out what's going to get your job done. Because really, when you call City Rentals, unless you are a pro contractor and you know what you're renting, technically your assumption is I am the pro. I know what I'm renting. I know what I'm doing. I know what this equipment, what the equipment can and cannot do, what job it can complete and what it can't complete. But on the other end of it, I'm also doing the equipment theft side of it, right? So if I'm asking you the proper questions here, I'm asking the right pre-qualifying questions. Any inconsistencies, I can weed out, right? I can weed out the thefts. I can weed out, the people are just okay. I just need this right now, and because they know they can sell it, right? So by me showing that I care, I'm making sure you get the equipment that you need to get the job done. But at the same time, if you are a criminal and your intention is to steal this equipment, you're going to struggle with those questions. It's going to, and those as a counter, the dynamic. So being a dynamic counter person is, as I'm asking these questions, I'm hearing your responses, and I'm okay. Well, that equipment really doesn't fit that job, and the time frame really doesn't fit it. And I can start looking for red flags. So part of providing great customer service, if there's inconsistencies or there's somebody that's not accepting that, those are red flags. Those are the, okay, wait a second here, this doesn't seem like a legit deal. So right away, just by providing top customer service, now what I'm doing is I'm vetting the customer, right? And I'm vetting it on many different levels.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so important. So we've talked about building trust with your employees. You're also building trust with the customer, and it's a mutual trust, right? It's, hey, I'm showing you my expertise, and I'm going to make a recommendation on the right. Like you said, we're not renting equipment, renting solutions, and sometimes, I imagine you may recommend a product that is lower revenue than what they had asked for because you're trying to do the right thing for the customer, right? Because you over a long period of time, you can build a great business that way. But you're also building trust. Like, okay, I'm going to give you this 100,000 piece of equipment. There's an expectation you're going to bring that back, right? And it's going to be in good
Uh-huh.
shape and reasonably good shape. Things happen, but like you're not going to steal it, and you're sort of vetting them. I know the theft piece has been really big in the industry. I know you in particular have been all over this. What are some of the questions or what the red flags that you're asking about as you're sort of testing to see if this is a potential criminal?
Yeah, so I mean, we vet right from the beginning, from depending on where they're located as an individual, pertaining to the job site. We've had it where we've had customers come in with, for people that don't know, we're about 40-45 minutes east of LA, right? So, or yeah, east of LA. So we had a guy come from Palmdale, drive from Palmdale, and his job site. So once we asked the question, where's your job site? His job site's back in LA. So then the question becomes, oh, okay, well, why'd you drive all the way out here to rent this when you passed
Yeah.
30 rental companies? Those
Yeah.
little things like that. Another marker is time of day. When are they coming in? How are they asking for the specific piece of equipment? There's a theft ring that's been trying to hit us several times, and they ask the same key identifying questions on specific model numbers, that kind of thing, but they can't answer questions pertaining to job duration, job specifics. You know what I mean? And so those are kind of the indicators that I look for. And any of those indicators that you're asking these questions and they come back with uneasy answers, right? There's a phrase, trust your gut. If your gut
Yeah.
is, you ask a question and there's a red flag marker and your gut says, I don't know about this, you're probably right.
Yeah.
On the other side of it is like, we have a thing of like, don't be afraid to say no. If it's a legit deal that if you're running a transaction and you've got this guy in front of you or on the phone, or this customer, I should say, and there's red flags and your gut is telling you this isn't a legit deal, it's probably not. Come talk to us. Find a higher up. If you can't get out of the rental, come talk to us. We promote to our counter guys. I'll never be upset if there's a rental taking place and there are red flags and your gut tells you no, and you turn the rental down, and then we later find out it was a legit deal. I won't be mad at that because you're trusting your gut. That's what I want you to do is and I think that's part of the culture side of it that weighs so heavy, is that when these decisions are made, we're not going to scrutinize the decision, right? Because then what that does is that falls on to the individual. So if I
Right.
say, Kyle, man, you really, and I come down on you on making that decision, the next time your gut says, I don't know if this is a good deal, you're not going to trust your gut. You're going to say, no, I shouldn't, okay, we're going to make this happen. And the next thing you know, there goes a skid steer, there's a backhoe, a scissor lift, a boom lift, so part of that is that buy-in is trusting, right? So the other side of it is trusting your people to make the right decisions and empowering them that, hey, if you've made that decision, I trust it, right? We're all human. We make mistakes. That's the great part of the human element of life, is that nobody's perfect, right? So no matter how hard you want to come down on people, I probably made two or three mistakes before I even went and talked to you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's kind of
Yeah.
humbling, in that essence, when you're talking
Yeah.
to humans. But that's the thing at the counter is reinforcing that, is like, you train the questions, you teach, and that's the thought process is, okay, if I'm using a jackhammer, and that's how we train it, if you're using it, what are the things that you're going to do? What are the things you're going to look at? What are the the different elements of the job that are going to make the decision on the type of equipment and the duration that you're needing it. And those are those red flag indicators. And of course, not even touching on documentation, driver's license, job site addresses, credit card names, numbers, all that stuff. I mean, that's a whole different pre-qualifying element, but just that interaction with the customer. I mean, you can weed out so much at the counter by just asking the right questions.
But I think it's awesome that you're giving your team permission to make mistakes. Like, look, we're never gonna be mad if you walk away from a deal, right? And you may walk away from a good customer potentially, right? That's just the reality of it.
Mhm.
I am conflict averse and I deal with it, but like, it's got to be a hard conversation telling someone in front of you, like, "Hey, I'm not gonna rent to you today." I mean, how do you handle that in the cases where there are red flags? You think
Mhm.
there may be potential theft. How do you actually have that conversation with the customer?
There's a few different ways that we have people that we tell people. One right away is that whole, oh man, I slipped up, Kyle. I'm sorry. That I got a reservation. I just totally missed it. The jackhammer's going out here in a little bit. I'm very sorry. I can't rent it to you. Or it's not available. Could you, is there another day maybe? And then depending on if it's a legit deal, you may say, oh, I could probably reschedule. I'll be there tomorrow, whatnot. If it's a bad deal, they may give you flack and argue of why they can't rent it right now. I've even had the interaction where I've had to tell people and they've pushed and pushed and pushed and we're trying to get out of the deal. Sometimes I've been so transparent just to say, look, Kyle, I'm not at all accusing you or saying anything. Just you got to understand that the questions I'm asking you and the way you're responding that's if someone was going to steal this is what they would say or do. And I'm not trying to accuse you, but I have to watch out for our business. And unfortunately, because of your answers, I'm not going to rent to you today.
Mm,
And I've had that. And is it confrontational? Possibly. I
yeah,
think that's based off the comfortability of the individual and how it's presented in a non-hostile way. But yeah, I tell individuals at the counter, if you've got a bad feeling and you need to get out of a rental and you can't, let us know. Just send me a message real quick or something, and I'll figure out a way. We'll kill the deal. It's but again, it's not just a kill the deal, walk away. There's ways we conversate about it depending on the
right.
situation. But yeah, we try to empower our people as much as
Yeah.
possible. But again, that other layer is you've got the driver element and you've got the yard element. I mean, all of them play just as much of a key factor in the equipment theft side and qualifying the customer as much as the counter. You may give me every great answer in the book, and then when you get out into the yard and the guys go to load you, you've got an out of state license plate, your tags are expired. These are questions that come up. And it's like, hey, wait a second here. This guy says he's from California. He's got a Washington truck. His tags are expired. And then now we're not the police, but at the same time, those are red flags.
Mm,
Same thing with the driver delivering the piece of equipment. Is there a customer on job site? Is it an empty lot? Is there security?
yeah.
These are all things we train our drivers on to notice and say, hey, I'm delivering a skid steer. This is an empty rail, right? This is like an empty rail yard, or this is an empty lot, or, like just to make sure the customer's not here, this is what I'm seeing. And then it's like, okay, wait a second, these are red flags. So empowering the people, the culture, letting them know that they play a key element in asset control and loss. I mean, that's a big thing. And when you put that on people, there's two ways, right? There's the pressure of like, oh man, I don't want to mess up. And like, and there's the pressure of losing an asset to the business, right? That's a big
Yeah.
deal. But then the other side of it is that competitive element, the element of
Hmm.
win, right? Like I won. I did good. I made sure I
Yeah.
vetted this customer and I killed a bad deal. This was great. I saved this. So there's the two elements of it that people are really attracted to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like we're competing with our competitors and the big bad nationals, but we're also competing against these thieves who think they can come in and take our equipment. Like we're not going to let them win, right?
Right.
I saw a recent report from the ARA that said they're seeing over $100 million of equipment stolen annually, and they said more than 360 pieces stolen per month, which is not insignificant. How often do you feel like these conversations are coming up? How often are potential criminals coming? Is it monthly? Is it more often now? Like, how often are you actually vetting people and going, "Hey, I'm not gonna rent from you today"?
Well, I will tell you, since the COVID days, there's been a different type of theft. I think there's been more of an increase. Like the side of it that we always see, right, is your location security. There's always going to be problems with that. Your
Yeah,
alarms, your fencing, all that. There's always that element of the break-ins, that kind of thing, and we've seen our fair share, right? But it's hard to say because the goal is like on the rental that that may not have gone through that I vetted, could, it's hard to say, did I save a theft or did I not, right?
Yeah.
But there are a lot more phishing going. There's a lot more phishing going on. I can tell you that phone calls is what we're really seeing now. In recent history,
Mm,
we did have stuff go on with another rental company where they had something stolen and it went back and forth, and we saw them several times, and someone left in handcuffs here.
mm,
That we were able to get arrested. That was part of this theft ring, right? Um,
yep.
but that the law enforcement side, that's a whole different conversation, but we have this a lot. I mean, if you think about, and then that's the nice thing about being involved, right, is being involved in your, especially with the California Rental Association. We are so close knit around here that if I
Yep.
get a bad phone, if I have a bad phone conversation with somebody, I pick up the phone and I talk to all the rental companies in our area, and it's the
Mm,
same thing. I'll get phone calls from other rental companies that say, hey, heads up, this is what we're seeing right now.
mm,
Even though, like you said, we're competing against everybody, but at the same time, right, we're in this together. Independent
yeah,
rental, there's power in numbers, right?
for
And
sure.
so us supporting each other, especially on the theft side, builds that trust in that relationship. And we do see that with other companies, that by having these types of relationships, there's the mutual understanding of certain elements of business, but then at the same time, we're supporting each other. We're helping to make sure that I've got companies supporting me to make sure our customers are taken care of, and vice versa. So it
Mm,
goes a long way. So not only are we protecting the assets by getting involved with other rental companies, but we're also promoting each other's businesses and helping support each other. So it's so cool because there's so many layers to all of this. Like your main objective, right, is to fight theft, but at the same time, what you don't really realize is you're networking, you're building these relationships with other competitors that are helping
mm,
support your business, and
mhm.
it's reciprocal, and that's what's so great about all this.
Yeah. Yeah, I never really like, obviously independents compete with each other, but like they've been very open in my mind. And like, yeah, I used to do software for car dealerships. Not the case, right? It's a very
Yeah.
different
Hmm.
vibe there. I think rental is like, hey, let's all build this together. By the way, the industry is growing, right? $60 billion of rental revenue in 2020, 2021. Now it's saying it could be over 80 billion. Like we can all win together. The pie is expanding, right? It's not a
Yeah.
fixed pie that we need to fight over. And the whole idea, enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Well, we can agree that these thieves suck. Like let's agree on
Yeah.
that. And
Well,
you build those relationships, and maybe you need to re-rent from a competitor, right? And those sort of doors start to open. Last thing on the theft, are you guys doing any verification of the licenses? Are you taking thumbprints? Or any other sort of processes you guys have put in place there?
no, no, we just train a lot on how to read IDs, how to look at
Yep.
driver's license. If they're counterfeit, fake, we look at those different markers. The thing about us is kind of how we control that is, internally we have, we only rent to certain license. So we have our own
Yep.
internal control that kind of limits the broadness of different forms of identification. So it allows us to zone in on red flags on one item. We don't do it yet. I know there are companies out there where you have the scanners, fingerprinting, and that kind of stuff. Who knows? We may go there, but at this time, no. We verify through driver's license, just physically right there, but
Mm,
we don't put them in any type of database or anything. Now,
yep.
we do deal with, with like the CRA's crime alert program, and with our software, any type of these red flags, that kind of thing. We keep a really good log of it, and that's a lot of times that's how we prevent it, is part of these other programs that we're a part of. So example would be the crime alert, the CRA crime alert program. Like if somebody came in at city rentals and they, whatever happened, they got out the door with a piece of equipment, we immediately send that out to our network in the crime alert program. And then once we
Mm,
receive that, we input that data into our system. And there's several times somebody has walked in and I'm like, hey, Kyle, just so you're aware, you were flagged. It looks like that there's an ongoing police little situation over here at X, Y, and Z rental company. Looks like there's a skid steer in question. And I've had the guy say, oh, no, no, that wasn't involved. I wasn't involved. And I said, well, either way, man, you got to get that taken care of. I can't rent to you. So we have had that element of it too, by using what we have at our disposal, and being transparent, not being afraid to say, yeah, one slipped through the door.
yeah.
That is, it's tough for a rental operator, man. Nobody wants to admit that a $60,000 piece of equipment went out the door under their watch. That's not something everybody wants to talk about. But at the same
No.
time, transparent about it, that's going to support the system that we have in place, right? Yeah, and it's just pertaining to the crime alert. I know there's tons of them out there, but it's utilizing what you have available to you.
And is that crime alert program through the CRA, is that just for California members, I imagine, or is that
Well,
other,
it's
like if
for
I'm in
CRA
Arizona, could I?
members. Yeah, CRA
Yeah,
members in general. We get like, because that's the thing is like, we have members across the seaboard: Arizona, Nevada, Oregon,
yeah,
Washington, Hawaii. So any of them within our network report that, we get them.
that's
So
awesome.
we're all constantly inputting that data into our system so that way we have it readily available in the occurrence that they walk in the door.
That's awesome. The strength of numbers, I think, and being able to use data technology to start to prevent this, right? You build this sort of stronghold network, right, where the independents can be, because I think the truth's out there. Like everybody has we already know who the bad good guys are. They've already hit my store, and they're probably going to go to your store next. If you could start to circulate some of that data in a systematic way, like you guys are doing, I think that's awesome. Big fan of obviously of the CRA and what you guys are doing.
Awesome.
Um,
Thank you.
we're almost out of time here. I do want to briefly ask about like the general market, and you can talk broadly about this, not necessarily particular to city rentals, but I visited several rental companies in the last month, and some are down, a lot are down actually, and having maybe worse years than they've had in 5+ years. This isn't a survey, and I've talked to thousands of customers, but I'm now hearing for the first time since I've been around, which has been about 5 years, that hey, we're actually not up and we're not flat, but we're actually down. And this is a seasonal, our busy season right now, and we're not seeing that surge we usually do. Is that something that you're hearing across other CRA members, or I mean, just generally, if you could talk where the market is right now, because I am starting to hear that there maybe is a slowdown happening in rental.
I mean, this year it's been tricky. There has been, if you look at numbers wise, there has been a little lull, in different
Yeah.
markets. It's hard to say. This is an interesting scenario that everybody's in this year. Not jumping on either side of any fence or whatever. I feel like there's just so much uncertainty. On what direction that we as an economy are going to go. So I think that plays a big part. People are just, they don't know. There's no confidence. So I have seen it. I can tell you that, just in general here in our market, we have seen a little bit of a lull. We're, and of course, as a business, this is where it gets fun, right? So you go to
Yeah.
the drawing board, and now it's, let's get innovative. Let's figure out how we can get that back, or drum up more numbers, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd say I definitely would agree. We're hearing from other rental centers in our area that, yeah, there has been a lull. We're peaks and valleys this year, starting
Yeah.
out, some months that we've seen, we're normally really busy. It's been a little slow, and then it picks up here and there, and then back down. And, it's very up and down right now.
Yeah. And I think obviously rental was booming in 2021, 2022, 2023, right? And there's this concept of the peacetime leadership and wartime leadership. And, maybe we may be going more towards a wartime. Like, all right, we got to buckle down. We
Yeah.
got to get through this, right? We're going to make some tough calls and really like, let's go win. Let's go, and be a little bit more aggressive on things. I think we'll cover this if we get audience listening in more episodes as we kind of go through the summer. But, we're almost halfway through the year here in June. And we're just seeing early signals, just talking to groups. So we'll see. I don't think anybody knows, but a lot of this stuff is like, it's like usually like, the Steve Jobs quotes, like a bunch of random dots in the moment. But when you look back, there's a straight line, right? So I think we'll be able to tell a story later this year about how this year shook out. It's just interesting. I think there's uncertainty would be the right way to put it. So
Mhm.
we'll see what happens. But Eddie, appreciate you coming on. Last question I have, it's like cool closing question. Everyone sort of pauses because I don't know how to answer it. So I'll just go ahead and ask it. Best career advice you've gotten, or maybe just good career advice you've gotten that's helped shape your success at City Rentals,
Career advice for city rentals, man. That's
or
that's
for you personally, like
Yeah.
career advice you've gotten that's really helped make you successful.
Don't be afraid to bring yourself into your career.
Mm,
Don't be afraid to be yourself. There's so many elements of each individual that make you who you are, and they're so positive and powerful. Don't be afraid to exemplify those. Whatever it is. To kind of, it's just kind of running right now, but to reinforce that answer, I did the peer executive boot camp, and one of the things they did is those personality tests. And then so you see where you are on all these different, diagrams, and how you mend with them, and then but what you get out of that is, like, no matter where you are on there, there's so many elements that are positive in so many ways that you can bring that into any type of career. So the big thing is, be true to yourself, bring yourself into your career, make it you, and really don't shy from that. Cause as soon as you shy from you, the next thing you know, you're out of you're doing uncomfortable things that you're not equipped to do. And then
yeah.
now it's like, hey, we've put this fish in this position to climb a tree. Now this fish is being judged because it can't climb a tree. I know that's a famous, diagram per se.
Yeah.
But it's true. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Bring yourself into the workplace and be you. Be true.
Mm, I love that. I think that that's one of the principles I live by is can you bring your full authentic self to not just work, but every aspect of your life, right? And can you build a culture that enables that? I think that's one of the most important things in life, not even just for ROI and EBITDA numbers, but just as a human being. How do you bring your full authentic self, right? We need more of that in this world. So we'll end on that note, Eddie. It's been a pleasure having you on. I won't tell Elliot that your beard's longer, but I do think it's longer. So Eddie, thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate you, Kyle. Thank you very much for having me.